Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Governmental Affairs full committee meeting, and we have several bills on the agenda. So we'll get started right away. I'd like to ask somebody to open us up in prayer. Representative Bazemore, would you do that? What number are you?
18.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Father, we do love you. We praise you. We glorify your holy name. We ask that you bless each and every person here, especially on this committee, Lord God, and allow us to hear what we need to hear and how we need to move for your people, Lord God, in the state of Georgia. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. So we're going to start with House Bill 1266, Representative Washburn. If you'll come on up to the table, and if you have anybody with you that you'd like to bring with you to the table, yeah, Representative Fry, come on up.
Sit with me.
I know y'all have worked a lot on this together.
We have, and I appreciate you letting him sit and assist me in presenting
So,
the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we heard testimony on this bill yesterday in subcommittee. Had a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversation. So if you would just present the bill to the full committee, and we'll see what kind of questions we've got.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. We are here today to present House Bill 1266, which is LC 550230. Before we get into the presentation of the bill, I think we all agree that we have a housing crisis in the state. We have a housing shortage, especially in the area of what I like to call entry-level housing. For most Georgia families, working families, the path to building any kind of financial stability and to building any sort of equity and net worth involves ownership in a home. We all have to have shelter. We all have to pay for shelter. And we all know that if a little working family starting out can buy that first small home by letting the property appreciate in value and at the same time reducing the debt, they can create that equity that can get left to other family members at some point in time. And so that has been the path to financial stability for generations, and we're in a crisis now of affordability and lack of product. As you know, I have worked in the past on this, and we had not been able to have much success. Last year, after the end of session, I decided to just wait to see what local communities want to do, and then a working group, of which I was not involved, put together a group, the Georgia Municipal Association, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Georgia Association of Home Builders, the Georgia Association of Realtors, Habitat for Humanity, and the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia began to work and to hold meetings around the state, and they had many of their members join their working group in that process. I was never part of those meetings. They did invite me to have dinner with them down in Macon when they were there, and I was honored to do that and to offer some thanks and some supportive comments to the work they were doing. My good friend, Representative Spencer Fry, who has been a strong ally relative to the housing situation, came up with an idea, and I want to give Spencer all the credit because he came up with this idea of the Choice Act. He presented that to this working group, and they have all worked together on that, and that is the product that we are putting before you today. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the lengthy preamble, but I thought it was necessary to say that to the full committee. So this act that they have developed, I will say very briefly, it incentivizes local governments to do certain things that would assist them in getting grants, et cetera. And I'm going to stop and let Representative Fry present the details of this bill and answer any questions about it, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I want to ask you to clarify before we move to Representative Fry, but you said there was a, did you call it a working group?
Yes.
That worked on this together. Could you tell the committee who all was on that working group, which organizations were a part of that?
I certainly will. Now, I may not be phrasing that correctly. What did y'all call yourselves? Task force. I'm sorry. I called it a working group. It was a task force. This task force was the Georgia Municipal Association, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Home Builders Association, the Georgia Association of Realtors, Habitat for Humanity, and the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. So that was the group, and I would want to point out this was not just staffers in these organizations. They invited their members in to meet and to be part of this. So this has been a great effort, a great coalition working to try to come up with legislation that will help us solve our housing issue in Georgia.
All right. Representative Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Washburn. This is it's been a pleasure to work with you and the group that we worked with. Members of the committee, we're looking at LC 5502230. Essentially, this is a bill, and I didn't invent the whole thing. I got the idea from, I think it was up in Missouri. No, wait, what? Montana. They had to they had to actually create a zoning code in the whole state because they really didn't have any buildings. So they did enabling legislation. To get that off the ground, what they did is had 10 things that they wanted their municipalities to do. And they said, hey, y'all got to choose 5 of them. And so what we have done is expanded that list, which is a list. My background is I'm a licensed contractor in the state of Georgia. I've been building for 25 years. It's a list I actually started like 20 years ago. And I've been keeping a list of all the things that I felt like were basically things that didn't concern life, health, or safety in the construction of a home. That would get in the way of creating more homes for the market, but also it adds to the cost of housing as we see it today. And so we came up with a list of about, 35 code sections. I think I had a bunch more in there. Some of them got taken out by the working group. And it basically incentivizes communities, governmental subdivisions across the state to look at their zoning codes and to choose 10 at a minimum. We want them to choose 10. And if they choose 10, they can qualify for state grants for infrastructure, CDBG and home funding through DCA. If you get up to 15, you get a higher qualification. And then if you get 20 items, you get the maximum qualification. And it gives you the maximum benefit. Potentially, the way the bill is written is you don't have to do your LMIG match, and you get some funding for the GFA infrastructure and solar grants. And so all this is, anybody can apply for any of these grants right now. All this does is offer opportunities for folks, municipalities and government subdivisions that are working towards creating more housing for their citizens. It gives them preference on the grant applications. We've set this up to be what I consider a revenue neutral piece of legislation. It's not going to really cost the state any money. The enforcement, the oversight could be handled with a simple affidavit from the county attorney or the city attorney that says that they've adopted these policies. I feel like that particular avenue of enforcement would be the best way to go about it and have minimal impact on the state from any administrative situations. It does things like, if you look at page 8, line 187 starts the Tier 1 policy. 188 imposes a minimum heated square footage requirement for residential dwellings of 12 100 square feet or less in 50% of the jurisdiction. So I went over these with a local group that I have never done business with before, but they were in the local government. And by just going a cursory glance at the list, they had already qualified for 7 out of the minimum 10 without even changing an ordinance yet. There's going to be a lot of counties that may not necessarily, some folks that may not necessarily feel like they need to be doing this. But for the next 2 years, I think we would have every elected official from every government subdivision across the state studying their zoning codes and talking about housing. Now, this necessarily isn't going to be a magic bullet to solve the housing crisis that we're facing. But let me put something in perspective for you. When you're looking at, I was corrected in yesterday's meeting, I was using last year's statistics for starter homes in the state of Georgia to be 350,000. The home builders, or the real estate group, told me that they're actually closer to 400. But let's do my math at 350 because I got that memorized. So 350 is your starter home house. Starter home, my parents bought one when they were like 22, I think. 24. So on an 80-20 mortgage, the bank's going to require you to have 20% down, which at 350 is going to be $70,000 cash. So once you get past the $70,000 in cash that you have to put down to buy your first starter home, you then have to finance $280,000 at today's interest rates and taxes and insurance. Is going to be about $2,800 to $3,000 a month. It's about 1% right now. So in order to afford that home, an individual would have to make about $10,000 a month to buy a starter home in the state of Georgia. Now, obviously, those numbers will increase when you go up to $400,000 for a starter home. But we're talking about the American dream of home ownership being unattainable for large portions of our population. And this is a revenue neutral incentive piece of legislation where we have an opportunity here to really have an effect on people's lives. You may ask yourself, well, what does it matter if they're paying $2,800 a month or $4,000 a month? Well, it matters a lot, especially to the local communities. In our area, we're able to sell homes at a price where we're freeing up about $800 a month for every one of our homeowners. And when you free up $800 a month, and I do not have a study to tell you what I'm about to tell you. Normally I would try to work on statistical data. But I would venture to say that that $800 a month is spent within 5 miles of that front door, which keeps our economy driving, keeps it going. And the more money that we can put in the pockets of our homeowners and our renters, for that matter, the better off our economy is going to be. And the more these families can pay for health care, car repairs, educational opportunities, anything else they may need to raise a family in this state. And I think this is a bold step. I think it's a step that we can take that would really change the lives of our citizenry and ease some of the financial pressure that they're feeling right now. And again, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's the first step in a long journey that we have in order to make the lives better. So I'll stand for any questions. I know I didn't really talk about the bill, but let me know if you got anything to ask me.
Representative, we've talked about this bill a good bit, and I've talked with both of y'all, and it might help the committee just to hear a little bit more on how it works. Like, I believe there's three statuses.
Okay, I'll get into
I
I'll
think
get
I
into
heard you
the
say
details.
there's 35 criteria that local governments would have the option of adopting. They need a minimum of 10 to qualify for the first level,
That's right.
then 15 to qualify for the middle, and then 20 to qualify for the highest level. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay. And just point out in the bill where those criteria start. I think it was
So the criteria start
188.
188 is the start of the choices. And by the way, it's called the Choice Act because the acronym is Community Housing Options Increase Cost Efficiency.
And so am I right that essentially the criteria encourage more density,
That's exactly
which
right.
is cost less to build?
Yes. And I'm sorry I left that out. These are basically zoning and density increases within a community. Again, now this bill is not about creating affordable housing. It's not low-income housing. It's all housing. It will make housing more affordable.
Not affordable by definition,
Not
affordable.
Not affordable by definition of affordable.
But more cost efficient, I think is
Cost
what you're saying.
manageable. That's exactly right.
All right. We do have a lot of questions. Maybe we should get to some of those, and that might, guide the rest of the discussion.
Sounds
So,
good.
let's see. Chairman Taylor, are you number 27? All right, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a few issues with this. I represent a rural area, and one of my community has a population of 10,000. The whole county is 25,000. And they don't need or want high density. They have affordable housing. They are working people like everybody else. Now, what's going to happen if they don't meet one of these criteria? They are going to be penalized because they are not picking level 1, 2, or 3 in getting their much needed grants. They use, whether it be LMIG money, it's taken me years to get some of their roads fixed. And now they're going to be penalized again when it's not something they need. This seems to me as an issue that should be determined locally. This is what the people and the citizens of a community want for their lifestyle or for what they want. We have a lot of farm areas, so does this mean because of that they have to build a house of 1,200 square feet? They don't have the needs. They're not going to be connected to a sewer system. It's 5 or 10 miles away. I think we have two Georges when it comes to things like this. And our rural communities, if you can consider taking out any of the rural communities where they're not going to have this apply to them, because it's something that would be an extreme hardship on our rural communities. And again, this should be a local home rule. This should not be something, what works in this case for Fulton or Gwinnett County doesn't work in Thomas or Grady or Mitchell or Baker or Randolph County. That's my big concern. Have you got an answer for it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Maybe not to your satisfaction, but I'm going to give it a try. So the LMIG, they will not be penalized at all. Okay? So the LMIG funding that they're already receiving, they already have to have a match for it.
Right.
If they didn't choose to do any of this, they still get their LMIG funding. They just have to match.
Is it fair for them to have a match when somebody else isn't? Because they did these things? They should, again, it's a penalty because they don't get the bonus, they don't get the extra.
I would define it as not a penalty because they're already having to do it.
It's in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that. I would point out that some of our large economic development projects are around those counties that have lower populations, and that they will be seeing a rise in those populations, and that all this does, again, they probably already qualify with 10 of these because they probably don't have a lot of these on their books already.
Then it should be their determination
That's
to
right.
say that locally in their zoning.
Yes, ma'am, I agree with you 100%. And they could get their county attorney to write an affidavit that they already qualify. And as long as that county attorney submits that affidavit saying what tier they are, They can get whatever they want to try to get.
Again, you're sort of backing them into something they may not want. And it's a different world when you're in a rural community. And there would be enforcement of a penalty that they shouldn't have to be subjected to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have some other lights blinking. We'll go to Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I kind of looked over your bill yesterday, last night, and today. And with the different tiers, I'm from Detroit, so we have a lot of duplexes and for family housing, so to speak. So I know that tier 1 is not really attractive. Tier 2 probably would start to be better because there's some restriction. But I look at things in the future. So we don't want to create a Pottersville. So what is it going to look like, or do you envision these areas look like when they're building these single-family homes or multifamily structures, so that they meet the code and that they are attractive, that they don't take any value away from those areas?
So one of the choices and one of the things that we encountered last year when we were working on some housing legislation was the reticence of, or the desire of our local communities to maintain home rule and to maintain their design standards. Now, while getting rid of design standards is in this bill, it doesn't force you to get rid of design standards whatsoever. And you're specifically, I think you might be referring to the idea that if a community chooses, okay, well, we're going to allow duplexes to be built in all of our single-family zoning, but they maintain control of their design standards, then they would be able to make a duplex look exactly like a house in the rest of the neighborhood through their design standard control, where it won't look any different, but you might have two different entrances and some parking around the back. So, you know, when we think of duplexes, I know I think of duplexes when I lived in college, in Athens in college. It's just this flat front, 4-window, 2-door, 2 driveways, maybe a skylight. Well, if you maintain the design standards, then you can dictate the design of that duplex that you allow in the single family. And that would apply to any of it. So we're not trying to say you can't make it look like Disney World if you want. You can do that if you want to. But just the policy of increasing the density and allowing 2 homes potentially where there was previously only allowed 1 creates a market-based solution where if we put more doors in the market, then the housing prices are going to stabilize and potentially eventually drop. And that's the ultimate goal of this. But design standards, maintaining the design standards would be the key to stopping like a Pottersville. Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Olalier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for bringing this bill forward, and I think many of us can speak to the housing shortage and crisis that exists in Georgia. And I don't want to get bogged down in the details. I know, to Chairman's earlier question about the exhaustive list of different tiers of options that municipalities can choose from, I think that's great. For me, the long and short of it is affordability can only be achieved by building more homes, period. There's no way to bring costs down, regardless of where you call home, without increasing the supply of homes to bring down that price pressure. And so I appreciate it's a difficult subject because I'm very sympathetic to Chairwoman's remarks about every city, every town has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities and needs and preferences. We never want to position ourselves to advantage one over the other. And so I'm very sympathetic to those comments. And the reality is we've got to confront this subject with solutions that create choice, not mandates, but choice for localities to choose what's going to work best for them. And this bill is a step in the right direction. So I applaud both of you, Rep. Washburn and Rep. Fry, for your work and the task force's work on this. And I hope, again, it's not a silver bullet. We're not going to achieve affordability in one day, but this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Let's hear from Representative Gullett.
Thank you. Thank you both. And I spent a good bit of time speaking to Representative Fry, and I haven't really spoke to Representative Washburn on this one yet, but just for the whole committee's sake here, my county is part of Metro Atlanta, but my county is workforce housing for Metro Atlanta. We are a bedroom community county, have been for a long time. 88% of our tax digest is on the homeowners, so commercial and industrial is not there. It's something that we're trying to get to. Over 80% of the people leave the county to work, and a large portion of the homes that we have in our county are starter homes, and with that come problems. Our schools are overrun. Each house that's built, the school doesn't cover the cost of the school. There are problems that we're trying to address statewide that will negatively affect my area. I think when we're talking, I didn't realize it was every single grant the state gives. I thought it was more tailored than that, but as I'm reading it, it does say every grant you might get from the state could be impacted or will be weighed by this. And my county is the one that had 7 that we went through, 7.5, I think, because we split the difference on one of them. And we've just redone our UDO, our uniform, I'm not sure to stand, design, whatever, or development ordinances is what it is. And so I don't see us coming back to where we can continue to increase housing, continue to lose money to the school system for every single house that is built in order to meet the justifications of getting some grant money in the hopes, because basically we're hurting my area to help other areas. And that's something, that's where my problem is. I have no problem with workforce housing. My county is full of it. I mean, it's proven 80% of the people leave the county to work. We are workforce housing. But what we're doing is we're sacrificing my county to help other counties who have this problem. And that's where my rub is with all of these bills that come like this. And so how do I tell my people back home, hey, I'm going to hurt you by not giving us our grant, or making you maybe don't have the ability to qualify for a grant that we pay into that would help my community, so that other people in the state can have workforce housing. How do I sell that back home?
That's a great question. I didn't want to out you as the person that I was going through this exercise with.
No, it was a good exercise. I'm glad we did it. I am.
We got 7 out of 10 without even trying. There was a couple that I think could go either way.
And we are a workforce housing community. I mean, that is what we are. So we only have 7. The goal is 20. I mean,
Representative Gullett, do you know what the average starter home price is in your county?
I don't know.
Just at a cursory glance, it's probably about $350 to $400 when I was looking down.
Yeah,
just for what's for sale right now.
That's probably a new home. I'm not sure, like used home. I mean, we have a lot of. We've had like starter homes being built in my area since the 90s. We're the 6th fastest growing county in the nation in the 2005 to 2000, right before the bubble.
Well, with all due respect, y'all don't have any grants that you're applying for.
That was DCA. I asked about DCA grants on that call. I didn't realize it was every grant. So that's not true anymore since it's all grants.
And that might be something that needs to be fixed, because that is not the intent. Okay? So we can look at that language for sure, because that's not the intent. It was the specific grants through DCA, through GFA, the LMIG match, and also federal trail grants.
Okay.
And most of those would be pass-through grants that don't cost the state money, that the state just administers.
Right, the federal grants coming through.
So the federal grants just
Right.
pass-through grants.
But outside of that, how do I sell this to my county? Say, hey guys, we are a veteran community. We know that every house we build, the school system is telling us that it's costing us money. So they raise the millage rate to cover. Our schools are overcrowded. We haven't focused on. We're trying to build new schools. That's expensive though. We did that a ton of new schools in the 90s. We're needing to do it now. They're starting that process, but that's not a quick process. Redistricting is a painful process for students, and it's actually every school system or every school district in my area is overcrowded now. So, hey guys, I appreciate, this is what I'm telling my county, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but the folks in the rest of the state, they're not doing their part, so we're going to be hurt by it.
Representative, I wanted to respond to your comment about the housing that you have coming in doesn't pay enough property taxes to pay for the service delivery. And that is indeed a problem. And it's a problem I've been thinking about for quite some time. But that problem is not going to be solved by the Choice Act. That's a taxation issue. And there's some solutions to that I have been thinking about. And I think that hinders entry-level housing for that very reason. Because a lot of our local governments say, well, we just don't want that price range because they don't pay enough taxes to pay for the service delivery. So that's a problem indeed.
It's a problem. That's the majority of what you have. It's not like we have, you need balance. We need balance in our economic, in commercial and industrial growth and residential growth. We need balance in all of that, but you also need balance in the types of housing that you're bringing there.
Well, but the marketplace is bringing the housing. The people are coming out there in the free market, if the land's available and they're buying it, they're building the houses. The state's not dictating that to them. So your market is what it is because of your location, probably because you have good schools, probably because you have low crime. That's a marketplace issue. State policy doesn't have anything to do with the fact that y'all are bursting at the seams out there.
Yeah, but we're encouraging other folks to do things, and because we are busting at the seams and can't make some of these other agreements, because we are workforce housing, to encourage other people workforce housing, we're going to lose money. Does that make sense?
No, it does not.
Okay, so we are a community that is full of workforce housing.
Okay.
And we have the problems because of that workforce housing. Cost of services, housing not meeting that, schools, traffic, roads, all that stuff that we're behind on, working through infrastructure, sewer, water, everything. And then, so because we are trying to manage that, and managing that, we created a UDO that's actually probably got us to up to 7.5 versus being at 4 or 5 of the numbers. And then, but because we're not, I don't think I would be willing to tell my county, please get us to 10. We're going to be losing state money so that other counties out there can get workforce housing when my county is full of workforce housing. Does that make sense? We don't get anything for being workforce housing for Metro Atlanta today. We're not getting any check marks for saying, hey guys, you killed it on workforce housing for Metro Atlanta. Thank you. 3 extra check marks towards your grant money. We don't get that.
Well,
and so it's all about your zoning of the future, and we can't do that now.
Representative, in all due respect, I do not see any state policy that directs people to move into your county. That is local control, and if y'all want to slow that down, you should. But I don't know of any state policy that pushes the people into your county. That is done by private business.
No, I'm not saying it's pushing people in our county. What I'm saying is other counties will be making these changes to get the grant money that my county would not be eligible for, because we've already done the things that you're asking these other counties to do.
Well, I understand your point. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on. We got other questions, and DCA is here, and we might call them up if they're willing shortly to clarify, some of this. Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have empathy for all of the different situations, and of course, one county doesn't fit all. But wouldn't the ability for other counties to increase their housing supply, take pressure off of other counties. And so the Choice Act it's a choice, and the local governments still have to rezone anything, so the people still have a say in whether or not these changes actually happen. And so the only point at which this even comes into play is if the entire community agrees and they hit these thresholds. And people who've already done some of them get credit for the ones they've already done. So I think it actually could take pressure off of those that don't have the ability to grow anymore or don't want to grow anymore, to allow the ones that are willing to take on the additional people that require additional resources to do that for these more rural communities. So I appreciate the bill. We've got to start somewhere.
Thank you, Representative Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am sometimes distracted by the contemplating a bill in terms of 159 counties and 500 cities. Do we know the number of counties and cities of this 159 plus 500 that get any of these grants? And the reason I'm asking that question to help you, I'm trying to figure out if it's true, which I think is what your point is. This is going to help the cities and county I represent. And Paulding County may or may not have a 5-acre minimum. Do you have a 5-acre minimum lot size? See, they don't have it. So I'm trying to figure out who this is really going to benefit and then therefore hurt nobody. If it only is going to benefit 10 counties, 15 counties, and 35 cities, then what's he worried about?
Well, so without being able to speak for my friend from Paulding County, I can understand the concern with the locals. I get that. Mm-hmm. I totally do. I have answered the question, do your local people get mad at you for doing all this stuff all the time? It's like, no, I've been doing this for 20 years. They're used to it. They probably don't listen to me say it anymore. But I think there is an idea that there's fear in change. There's a step that we can take here to make the lives better of all the citizens in the state by moving forward and being a leader in the Southeast and maybe in the nation. We're taking a big step to stabilizing our housing, which stabilizes our economy and puts more money in our citizens' pockets to spend in our state. I mean, I don't think anybody is losing. If you don't gain something, you don't lose anything because you didn't gain.
I'm supportive of your effort here. I think it's time we have to do some, and I'll use the word experimentation, but there are people in this room who might know how many counties have a minimum 5-acre lot requirement, or how many of the 500 cities have. I mean, the city of Decatur does not have a minimum 5-acre lot.
Certainly.
They only got 4,
And this actually, and when talking to Representative Gullett's planning department, they're actually at a 20,000 square foot minimum, I think was one of their lowest. And so they fit under the half-acre lot. That counted as one of their check marks. The exact number of communities that would be affected by this, personally, I'll say every single community will be affected by this in a positive way. I think that once we as a state, once we as leaders in the state start making moves like this to create the dialogue of all around the state for the next 2 years, every elected official in these government subdivisions is going to be talking about housing and zoning. And that's going to have a very positive effect on the educational level of our elected officials on housing and zoning would be the first thing I can think of.
We've got more lights blinking, and we got a busy agenda today, so we're going to move to Representative Saines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the two representatives who've brought this bill forward. I asked Legislative Council, because I'll be honest, I don't love every part of this bill, but I asked, some things maybe could be perfected. There's some judgment calls in it. I asked what other workforce housing bill has been brought. Are y'all aware of any that this committee has heard? I don't believe there is the point. This is, to me, good legislation. It addresses something that we've all gone to our districts, and every citizen has mentioned that the cost of being able to, for a first-time military dependent family, being able to afford, for the first time in Camden County's history, they can't afford to buy a house in Camden County with their allowance, because the cost in a median income county has gone up by 3 times what it was 10 years ago. So this bill, at least to my understanding, utilizes and incentivizes our free market private developers to allow them to lower the cost and the threshold of being able to afford a home. Is that not true? And to me, I'm glad if Glenn County is doing something right. If the strain in Glenn County's housing market puts a strain in Camden County's market. So if it addresses any of these communities in a better, I think we're all better off. Is that the general policy consensus that we're looking at here?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and I really do appreciate y'all working on something and bringing something before this committee, and I look forward to supporting it at the appropriate time.
I'm going to take one more question, then we'll see if there's a motion. Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Representative. And Representative Saines, you took the words right out of my mouth. So I was going to ask, was there another comprehensive bill that has been introduced this session or before this session? Because we all know and have known for years that we have a crisis and we have to start somewhere. Haven't seen anything. So thank you so very much for bringing it. I appreciate it. And this will move the needle forward. And if we have to tweak it here and there, next year, the year after, let's do that, but start somewhere.
Yeah. So obviously there's some mixed opinions and on the bill, which a lot of times is how you find the best solutions when there's disagreement on both sides, but some solution in the middle somewhere. But I think at this time we'll just see what the will of the committee is. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. All right, I believe the ayes have it. So it moves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
all right,
members of the committee.
All right, next we'll hear from Chairman Alan Powell. If you're ready for House Bill 17. What number are you? Number 1.
Be number 1 and in your hearts and souls.
So House Bill 17 is a bill, it's an election chain of custody bill that we've heard in this committee several times. We actually passed it out last year, and it didn't make it across the finish line, after it got out of here, but
very good.
Here we go again.
Thank you. Would you rather for me to go to the podium or sit?
I'm fine with you right there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. This isn't a new bill. This bill was passed out of the House, out of the committee, out of the House, went through perfecting 3 years ago. Didn't make it through sine die over on the Senate side. Reintroduced it last year, passed this committee, went to rules, didn't get over crossover day, so I brought it back. Persistence gains points, if nothing else. A lot of y'all, if I'm redundant, because y'all have probably heard this dialogue before, after the 2016 and the 2020 elections. We all knew that there was a lot of issues that had been brought up. And after the 2020 elections, when we passed, when we did a lot of the cleanup language to the election system in 2002, there were some other things that other issues that circle around our elections kept coming out. We had a lady in Northeast Georgia, and Representative Leverett, Chairman Leverett, and I think he's escaped, but he and I have a constituent up that way, and this is a constituent-oriented bill. And one of the things we deal with, this committee deals with all the technology with QR codes and with the machinery and all, but this bill was just a very simplified bill that a lady came up and said, listen, why don't y'all have a chain of custody during the process of the balloting? Lock up the ballots, put the ballots and such during every process, put them in secure, water-secure boxes, put a tag on them, put a form, let the Secretary of State design a form so that anybody that's in and out of those ballot boxes, when they're bringing them in and such, that there's a chain of custody. And I think a lot of y'all may remember that there was a lot of to-do about stuff about one of the polling places that a lot of the ballots couldn't be addressed because of something about a leak in a bathroom leak or something. And that's what this does. One of the reasons that I thought this was so unique was that sometimes it's the simplified things that gives us reason to take away the suspicion in a lot of these areas. I was real big about it then, and I'm even bigger about it now, that the problem with elections in our state is that we have 150 some odd counties, and they all do it different. There needs to be a certain level of uniformity to take the suspicion from metro toward the rural and the rural toward the metro to take it out. And I think that's what we've been doing. If you'll go through the bill, I mean, it's pretty simple, but if you'll look through it, you've got a section that deals with the absentee ballots on Section 1 was a cleanup language that had been asked somewhere along the way. Section 2 deals with the drop boxes. You know, basically, if you got drop boxes, if they're not in use, then you seal them so ballots can't be put in them. As you go on through there, you will see a chain of custody. When ballots are moved from those drop boxes, they'll be put in a box, and there's a chain of custody who picks them up. And if they're not counted promptly, then there would be a whatever, the lock on the box or whatever. Section 3 deals with the absentees. Extensive in there since so much deals with absentees. In the absentees, you'll have the returned absentees. So if a returned absentee, until they're counted and unsealed, they need to be categorized, put in a box, and locked up with that chain of custody. Opening the absentees. Once the absentee ballots are opened, another reference to the chain of custody and what it would be done. Then you go on to the challenge ballots. You know, some of the ballots get challenged. Well, put them in a lockbox and secure them so that they'll be secured with a chain of custody. Provisional ballots, the same thing. And then the election day ballots. So, you know, throughout the process, it's just really just old-fashioned, a chain of custody. Put them together. Now, the unique thing I will tell you, that 3 years ago, the angst that this created from election boards around the state, you would have thought it was the next coming of Jesus Christ. They didn't like it because they was going to have to work a little bit. Well, it got amended. They didn't have to count sheafs of paper, and all of a sudden it sort of took the edge off of it. Then all of a sudden we had ACCG and GMA. All of a sudden they got on it, which gave me pause to wonder what was wrong if they would agree with anything that I've done. But then yesterday in the subcommittee, again, we had another situation that the Secretary of State's office, ACCG, and Mr. Favorito all agreed. They all held their hands up. So, you know, that's where this bill is, ladies and gentlemen. Be glad to answer any questions if you move this bill forward. Or even better, I suspect with all the election bills, that it would be folded into some of the other election bills so it makes it on to the finish line.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You've answered this for me before, but just for everybody to hear, where were the county election folks get these boxes? Where
would
can
they
they
get
get
'em?
them? Yeah. Are they
Yeah.
readily available?
You
Are
can
they
go
expensive?
you can go to a Home Depot and buy these tough containers. I mean, there's nothing particular that says it's got to be. We're not the federal government. We don't need to buy $100 hammers. You know, as long as it's a waterproof box, they can put a seal on there. They can put the little chain lock on it. Whatever they wish to do, that's up to them. And they would use basically a chain of custody form prescribed by the Secretary of State's office.
All right. Let's hear from Representative Gullett.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, for bringing the bill. I appreciate you staying on this one and keep working through the process. I know you presented it several times. I guess it didn't cross the finish line last year. It came back to committee. Is that why we're hearing it again?
I think they didn't want to do election bills last year. I think they were waiting until this year.
Yeah. No. Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate you. Keep going on this thing and just get it across the finish line. So at the appropriate time, I'll make a motion.
All right. Let's hear from Representative Bernal, then we'll entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your persistence with this bill, because I remember when you first brought it. And one of the reasons it didn't pass then was because I asked you what kind of boxes, and you gave that same answer today about just any kind of box. It can't just be any kind of box. If you're asking us to be uniform, then the answer should be, you should already come to us with a box that, or whatever the name of it is, to tell us what we're going to do. Because if I order a box from a box place and it has all kind of locks and everything, and then my friend here from Athens just goes to Walmart and gets a box and tries to figure out how he can rig a lock on it, they're not secure. So we're going backwards. But the other part is that you had in here also about drop boxes, and drop boxes weren't in your original bill. So could you explain that part for me?
Well, I don't know what was or wasn't, but this is the same bill that passed this committee last year. There's been nothing added to it. It was just basically, this is the same bill that passed this committee last year.
Okay, well, maybe I'm asking because of some of the things that have been said about drop boxes, and that's just a personal thing for me. But I know with our boxes, they are designed so that when there's not an election time, that you cannot put ballots in there, or when the time is up. But I still go back to the same question. We have to have, if we're gonna have, if you say you want to have uniformity, we have to have uniformity in the box.
And this bill says that the Secretary of State's office, that they'll submit a chain of custody, the form. I have no idea in my mind, because as legislators, we don't go out and price boxes for counties, but I'm sure that they will pick an affordable box of some sort, and they will then subscribe it to the counties or provide it to them or tell them. I know that 3 years ago, the issue with the counties was this was going to bankrupt them. They didn't know what it was going to cost them, how much time, how much labor. They were talking about, if you may remember 3 years ago, they had anxiety about they were going to have to build storage rooms for this. No, they don't. They got storage rooms. Put them in a waterproof, a secure, and some type of a box. Now, I only use that description of the box at Home Depot. I store liquor in my Home Depot boxes because, quite frankly, I think more of that than I do a lot of things in my life. I store books. I store tax returns. I store everything in the world out of those very boxes that I'm talking about that you buy from Home Depot. They're a black and yellow box with a yellow lid, and I swear you can put about anything in those and a cat can't get in them.
I have several of those boxes in my basement now. But who's going to pay for this again? Who is who's going to be responsible for buying the boxes? Is that on the individual counties or the Secretary of State?
Unless the Secretary of State and the Elections Division, unless they choose to do so, then the counties would do that.
And that was my reason for asking Chairman Powell to clarify that the boxes are readily available.
They are.
And not expensive.
Exactly.
So let's see, Representative Saines.
Thank you. And the first time I heard of chain of custody, it was in the police academy, and it's basic concept that all law enforcement agencies follow. And to your understanding, do we prescribe the Ziploc bag that we ask law enforcement agencies to put evidence in?
Not that I know of.
Does that seem to affect their ability to?
That's usually left up to them and to the courts.
Does that seem to affect their ability to accurately utilize a given method of securing that evidence?
I think that the term chain of custody would be incumbent on those people that are using it to get to the final message that you keep these ballots secure, that you've got a chain of custody. Who's had their hand in the boxes? Who downloaded? Who opened them up? Who put them in there at every course of the way? So if there are any questions asked that we have seen in past elections, maybe this might be one of the few things that we don't have arguments about in a false narrative or a plus narrative about.
I appreciate the author bringing this. I'm at a loss, and it is a question, but I don't know if you have the answer to it. I just don't understand why some members, maybe in this committee, in this House, seem to feel like the golden ticket to our democracy should be treated with less reverence than a tissue paper at any given crime scene in this state. So I thank you for bringing this and giving parity to that process.
And again, I want to thank the constituent that Chairman Leverett and I have. You know, we heard all of this, and quite honestly, I had heard so much about the elections a few years ago, but this was a citizen. Wasn't a political party, wasn't anybody that had anxiety, but somebody that came up with an idea that this just solves a problem.
Well, we've heard this bill several times, and we voted it out several times. Let's see what the committee wants to do today. We already have a motion. Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. No. All right, it moves. All right, let's see. Let's go to House Bill 1149, Representative Maynard. You want to present from your chair, or sure. What number are you? Okay. Representative Maynard, would you read off your LC number, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The LC number is LC 472909S, and this is a substitute to House Bill 1149. I presented this bill in subcommittee the other day. In a nutshell, what this bill does is there are discretionary funds that our constitutional officers have access to. Constitutional officers are the sheriffs, probate judges, the clerks. I believe I named all of them. I may have missed some. And right now, discretionary funds are not required to be reported to the county. ACCG did assist in the language with the bill. They spoke at the subcommittee to this bill. We had some testimony from committee members in subcommittee that mentioned the problems that they're having with some constitutional officers in their county. Why is this bill important, and why should it be passed? If you think about right now, if a clerk of a county is receiving fees, they can use those fees for pretty much anything that they want to use those fees for. If they're choosing to use the fees for income, they do report those fees on their personal taxes. But whatever those discretionary funds are, they are not reporting it to the county. So currently, out of all the counties in the state of Georgia, there's, I know you're exactly, out of all the counties in the state of Georgia, no one has access to or knowledge of the amount of discretionary funds that are being received from constitutional officers. This bill does not change how they use their constitutional fees. They can continue to use it for personal income. They can continue to do whatever they want for the management of their office. This simply is saying that if you are collecting revenue as a county official, you must let the county know what those fees are. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, we've got a couple questions. We'll hear from Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was really concerned yesterday about your bill, and so I talked to my probate judge and about it, and I was asking her, and we don't have these issues. So is there some particular group, because yesterday you talked about passports, so our county doesn't deal with passports, so that's not a fee for us. And she told me that she reports on a regular basis and that most counties do. So is there a particular county or somebody, because I'm not really sure how this came about.
I think if we were to let ACCG speak to that, they could tell you specifically how the majority of counties are not reporting this.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Oliver.
I can think of passport fees and vending machine fees and copying, but I'm trying to think of other examples of discretionary income that a probate judge or a clerk or a tax assessor or a sheriff might receive.
So it is commissary funds. It is the the
Commissary?
vending machines
That's what I
in the
said,
jails. It is the telephone calls. It is the passport fees. And I would refer to Stuart if he had a list of all of the different fees that constitutional officers receive that are discretionary. I don't have the comprehensive list, but I can tell you that, there are some clerks from collecting these fees. They're making almost upwards of $500,000 because they are collecting the discretionary fees and not reporting it.
You may be aware that there is a passport fee disclosure bill that's passing and moving through. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that.
So what you're going after then that wouldn't include that is the vending machines. I didn't know the corrections vendor or the jail vendor for telephone services is a discretionary fund.
I was told it's a discretionary fund.
Let's hear from Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Maynard, would the fees, like in my area, when I was mayor, we had a contract with the tax commissioner to collect taxes on behalf of the city. Those fees that we paid the tax commissioner, are those discretionary funds? The tax commissioner is obviously, the duty is to collect taxes for the county, but wasn't really required to collect the taxes for the city tax. So is that discretionary revenue? Is that what you're talking about, part of this bill?
So all fees that constitutional officers collect are not necessarily discretionary. So that particular example, I cannot tell you if that individual contract went to discretionary fees or not. So if they are not discretionary fees, constitutional officers are reporting all other fees. They're just not reporting the discretionary funds.
Could we get an opinion from Lake Council about that?
Mr. Morelli? What number? 15. All right, go ahead.
So as it relates to the tax commissioner fees, it's been a while since I've looked at that law, but I think occasionally that actually is income for the tax commissioner, him or herself. But again, off the top of my head, I don't have a great answer for you.
So that may be considered discretionary funds because that's not funds that the constitutional officer is receiving from the county. So in my mind, I see that as discretional.
It depends, I guess, if the tax commissioner put it aside as money to use for the office versus supplementing his or her own income.
Okay.
I think that's a great question, though, and it's the relevance of of the bill. So if you have fees and income and revenue coming in, the citizens of the state of Georgia should know where all of those funds, revenue, and fees are going to. So right now, it is up to the constitutional officer to decide, do I want this to be transparent or do I not want it to be transparent?
Could our friends from ACCG bring any clarity on the? Go ahead,
I think
Chairman
that's
Collins, if you want to.
That's a considerable, I mean, that's a question I think would be very important in my mind. I mean, in my county, you know, our tax commissioner does a great job. I'm not, you know, gonna pick on her because I think she does a great job, but we've got 5 municipalities and she's collecting taxes for all those and getting paid for that above and beyond what the county is paying. And I'm sure that happens a lot across the state, and this would be a good transparency bill in my mind to be able to shed some light on exactly how much money is going through there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Clint Mueller with ACCG. So the discretionary funds are really funds that don't flow through the normal county audit budget process. Those funds could be for personal compensation, but they could also be just for the office. In other words, they use them to have a party in the office, or they use them to buy something that's not in the budget. That could be discretionary. So you do have tax commissioners that part of the money they get for collecting city taxes goes to the county. That's not discretionary. Now, the part that goes as personal compensation or goes to their office they can give their employees a bonus with that money if they want. That's what we mean by discretionary. They can keep part of it for personal compensation, part of it for bonuses. They could have a party for their office if they want to do that. So you've got the tax commissioner that has those discretionary funds. The Superior Court clerk has discretionary funds. Sheriff has discretionary funds, jail commissary fund, telephone fund. Those are funds that typically aren't being sent to the county through the finance department and getting incorporated into the audit. They just stay with the officer, and we may or may not know about them. In a lot of places, we do know about it. A lot of places, they're voluntarily disclosed, but in some places, they're not disclosed. And I think what this bill is trying to do is just say, look, we need to make sure those funds are disclosed in the audit for transparency purposes, so at least the public knows how much is being collected from those sources.
So, any idea what kind of range, as far as an amount of discretionary funds may be passing through a county? It sounds like it could be as little as a few $100s to how much?
Well, it kind of depends on what they do, right? So we have some tax commissioners that collect for cities and some that don't. Same with Superior Court clerks, some that do the passport, some that do not. Some of the sheriffs do. Most of them probably have a jail commissary fund and a telephone fund, but to the extent, I don't know. I'm sure it varies widely across the state from county to county.
All right. Any more questions for Mr. Mueller?
Thanks.
Representative Oliver, Mr. Mueller, she may have a question for you. Not sure.
For you, sir, or the author, I don't see a definition of discretionary funds in the bill, and that's what makes me most nervous, because obviously it's going to be interpreted differently, and the idea of the tax commissioner's decision or the county policy about whether or not that's personal income that he's got over in a lockbox, or whether or not it is recorded and shared with the county, is kind of an example of why the definition of this is just unknowable based on the draft that's before me.
Yeah, I would say when we're talking about, so obviously our constitutional officers have a lot of discretion as to how they spend the budgeted funds that are given to. This is money that's not part of the budget.
That's what I know.
So that's really, and so I see your point about the terminology, but we're really talking about money that's outside the normal budgeted appropriated money from the county. These aren't appropriated funds.
I get it. We just don't know what the other is. In my county, the dispute came up about the vending machine and the parties.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 159 counties and 500 cities, what the discretionary funds are, we need a definition, is my view.
Maybe, is there anything in here, Todd? I mean, my thought would be, if it's not appropriated money, if it's money that comes directly to that office and never is appropriated, never goes through the finance department, then I would think that is the type of funds you're talking about here. Right, that's right.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
let's move. Did you have another question, Representative Oliver?
No, sir,
Okay,
thank you.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Representative Gullett.
I just want to thank you for the bill. I think that transparency is key, and I think that you know, we need to shed some sunlight onto this in every community, for everyone who's getting money, whether it's, you know, appropriated or whether it's discretionary money or whatever it is. I think that's just it's an important part of government and an important part of our constituents of what they expect of us. So holds everyone accountable and is transparent. So good bill. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm going to take one more question, then we'll see what the will of the committee is. Representative Olalier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rep, for bringing the bill to us. I just want to be clear. So if it's not part of the official budget, it's treated and characterized as discretionary.
Yes.
And this would roll any expenditure from that pool of discretionary funds into a normal auditing process that a county would go through.
Yes. The only difference, though, is this bill is not saying that the county can now tell the constitutional officer what to do with it, because appropriated money, sometimes the county can say, this is for X, Y, and Z.
They can't affect or influence the purposing of it, but they can mandate the auditing of those expenditures, correct?
Well, the bill will
The bill.
mandate it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
And if it's the, you know, will of the body, if you guys feel like there needs to be a definition included, you know, I'm happy with that friendly amendment. If that is what, you know, this body thought was necessary. But to the ACCG's point is discretionary is anything that is not appropriated. They're just receiving it. That kind of is how it has always been considered.
What's the will of the committee on this bill? All right, we have a motion to pass. Believe we have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. No. All right, believe the ayes have it. So it moves.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next we're going to hear from Representative Reeves. He presented a bill to us last week, and I believe the number is 1113. If you would give us the LC number that you're working off of, and tell us what the changes are that you made since last week.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman LaHood. We are on LC 560153S. And the changes we made since last week are on page 4. We had language from DHS and DBHDD that they requested on page 4 of the bill, specifically in paragraph 12. Those two state agencies join the Department of Revenue, Department of Banking and Finance, and the Secretary of State's office in having provisions specific to their agency operations that are now included in this version of the bill. And to follow up on the discussion and the questions last week, I want to make it clear that any federal gathering of information or campaign matters, that status quo. Nothing in this bill affects that. This bill, anything regarding campaign expenditures at the federal or the state level, any campaign related or political related disclosures, status quo. Nothing in this bill affects that. Specifically on page 3 of the bill, those are the exemptions from this bill. And then Title 21, which is referenced on line 47, that is the elections code with the State Ethics Commission. So everything in state law pertaining to political disclosure, that is not affected by this bill. Any criminal investigations, any court-ordered discovery or anything like that, there are exemptions also on page 3 in that part of the bill that are not affected. Also, there was a question at the last meeting about public money receipt of public money or donations to public entities, that is retained. That is not affected. Public money is fully disclosed. If the public donates to a nonprofit, or if a nonprofit donates to the public, that is fully out in the open and subject to disclosure. What is protected in this bill is donors to nonprofits, and that's it. So there's reference today to 159 counties, 500 cities, and there are a large number of school entities and other state agencies. What this bill says is those governmental entities in Georgia are prohibited from gathering and disseminating nonprofit donors lists except as provided in this bill, which means that you, the General Assembly, you are the ones who decide the limited circumstances that nonprofit donors' information can be gathered. So criminal investigations, state ethics commission, discovery, things like that. Last time we spent a lot of time talking about the U.S. Supreme Court precedent that protects donor privacy due to privacy and also the freedom of association. And this bill honors that and codifies that here in Georgia. You heard last time that many states have done the same thing. There was a reference to the fact that sometimes you check, I want to be an anonymous donor, and that's between you and that entity. You know, a lot of nonprofits don't want their donor list out there so they don't get hounded by other organizations. So there are a lot of reasons why donors want to remain private. They have a right to remain private, and this bill honors that. It prohibits state agencies, subject to certain exceptions, from accessing or disclosing the information. What it does not do is interfere with law enforcement, political disclosure, and things like that. With that, I'll yield for questions. I would say that, quite frankly, cancel culture, that is something that donors are concerned about. It's bad. It cuts both ways. It's on a lot of donors' minds. And this keeps nonprofit donors out of the crosshairs of that issue by keeping them confidential when they give to nonprofits.
All right. Well, thanks for working on the bill and the explanation. And I believe Representative Saines has a question.
Thank you for bringing this. I know I had my reservations on this bill. I appreciate the author working with me in clarity. I would take a little bit of hold to say it doesn't affect political donations, because we know C4s can perform political activity, but I do understand and I do support the bill because it is in line with what is law at this point. It just clarifies Georgia code in line with those court decisions. So I appreciate the bill and your time and consideration and the stakeholders you have on it.
Thank you. And again, any existing federal or state disclosure requirements are honored by this bill.
All right. What's the will of the committee at this time? All right. Move to pass. We got a second. Any discussion? Don't see any. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. No. All right. I believe the ayes have it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we've got House Bill 1253, Representative Victor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay with the chair, I'll just present from my seat. Okay, thank you, sir. I presented this bill myself, and Chair Lady Lynn Smith, who's Section 1 of the bill is her bill that she presented to this to our subcommittee a couple of weeks back. Section 1 has had no changes. We are working from a substitute LC 472923S. And what I'll do is go quickly through the changes from the version we spoke about yesterday. What this bill does, the first portion of this bill creates a category of districts called special rural districts, which is geared towards smaller counties that are contiguous and having difficulty meeting the required services in this state. A very good bill. It was a big concern, something that Chair Lady Smith and our former Rules Chair, Chairman Richard Smith, had discussed and worked on for some time. So that's the first portion of the bill, Section 1. Section 2 is the second legacy portion of this bill, and it was, as I understand it, the final bill drafted by, again, another former Rules Chairman, Chairman Jay Powell. And this deals with some alterations to the structure, if you will, of our regional commission governing boards and the requirements for them. The differences between the previous version that was presented in subcommittee and the version we have now is we have I've adjusted in the area related to the municipal members of the commission. We've removed that those members had to be chief elected officials. This would allow the mayor or the chief elected official to basically designate someone to serve, but they do still have to be an elected official, so it would have to be a council member if the mayor himself didn't serve in that capacity. I've also adjusted the training section, which in the version you have is line 144, starts at line 143. Within 6 months of taking office as a member of the council, the department shall provide, and in the original version, it had that the department, that's DCA, would provide the training. Here, we're saying that the department shall provide assistance to the regional commission as necessary to ensure that all members of regional councils complete appropriate training in their duties, tasks, and responsibilities. The original version also delineated several specific topics that training had to include, and we've removed those because I think the three qualifiers that were in that I just read pretty much cover those, and those were training in leadership, service delivery strategy, organizational accountability, and planning. And if the training includes anything required for the duties, tasks, and responsibilities of the position, that should be included. Those are the differences between the bill as presented in subcommittee. There have been other suggestions made that I am considering and we're discussing with leadership on both of these. Again, this is not something that is unique that I came up with. This actually came from a recommendation several years ago from our Rural Development Council and was asked this session by the current co-chairs and vice chair of the Rural Development Council that it come forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee?
Move to pass.
All right, let me take one question from Chairman Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the representative. I just, he and I have talked, and I appreciate his willingness to entertain further, discussion and possible changes. Thank you.
All right, I think we had a move to pass. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Is this one you'd like to offer a change or no? Okay. All right, so no discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right, it carries. All right.